Hello everyone, welcome to today's reflection and meditation. The title is Stimulus and Response, and it's taken from a quote that I ran across by Viktor Frankl. I'm going to read the quote directly. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. There's a lot there. And I am only taking a little nugget, a little way of speaking to these three sentences, that there's so much to be unpacked. Today, we're beginning the final leg of our meditation series. We're down to the final meditations, and I've decided that each day is going to be in some way about the life of Jesus. Now, if you come from any form of Christianity, and I'm not assuming you do or you don't, you will know that this time of year in that tradition, in many different ways through the variants of Christianity, this is a leading up to a very powerful moment in the life of this person that is called Jesus. It's leading up to a betrayal, a crucifixion, a death, and a resurrection. And in preparation for this powerful remembrance, oftentimes there are weeks that are spent meditating and fasting and getting ready. And that's what we've been doing. Not to be followers of Jesus. I'm not even saying he wanted that, but we are doing it as a collective remembrance that there are times where the energy of our past, present, and future are heightened around the themes that the life of Jesus evoke and represent. Because the pattern of his life is the pattern of and the potential of every human life. In it contained everything that takes place. We can extrapolate what is taking place and apply it to our own lives in every single part of our lives. And what we're doing here in this final part of our series is we're going to pull from his life the themes each day that obviously I'm being inspired by, that can apply to our own lives. And it was this Viktor Frankl quote that came to me today. In our lives, we are in a sea of stimulation. We're in a sea of words and events and happenings, some that we initiate, most of which we don't initiate. And we can call this stimuli. And we are in relationship with it, which is attenuating our theme. And there is a space for our own response in this relationship. Now, sometimes that space might be a fraction of a second because our response comes so quickly. Other times, we're free to allow that space to be this amount of time or this amount of time. And what Viktor Frankl points out is that it's in that space that we can find our power. So the power isn't in the response, the power is in the space. And it's in our coming into connection with that power that can influence our response. And in our response is where we experience our growth and our freedom. So I want to take 4 chapters from the Gospel of John as fodder for this stimuli and response for you. Now, it would be enough to take just one story, but I want to make a broader point in this reflection than the one story. But it's going to take doing a bit of a setup for us to get to it. So in the Gospel of John, we have this remarkable opening. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So he's making up front a really large claim that Jesus is the Word of God, and what the Word of God is in the beginning of this gospel. And then the whole gospel narrative is working out that through the stories. So there is a big existential and metaphysical direction to John's gospel, and that is, who is this Jesus and what is this Jesus? What is this encounter? And there's a lot of openness for you to kind of take the text and come to it yourself. You get the stimulus, you've got space, and you can choose the response. So in chapter 5, it starts out with a story that's pretty well known of a paralytic that is at a pool. And he's at this healing pool, and it's in Jerusalem. And the waters are stirred. And when they're stirred, it's said that the first one that gets to the waters has the gift and the miracle of healing. And this paralytic has been there, I think, for 38 years and has never made it fast enough to the pool. So Jesus approaches him on the Sabbath and heals him by saying, "Pick up your mat and walk." And he calls God his Father. And because he heals on the Sabbath, the leaders in the Jewish tradition seek to persecute him because Jesus is doing something that's contrary to the laws of his tradition. He is doing something, but he says that God is here to heal at all times. So Jesus stands for a teaching that in that time would be a different interpretation of the covenant relationship that Judaism represents. Now, he's avoiding Jewish leadership contacts because it's gotten escalated, and he knows they're out to arrest him, and there's even talk of persecution and death. But he doesn't avoid it completely. So here we've got this remarkable passage where Jesus is offering a new way to respond to the role of authority and where authority lay. He's called into question because he talks about God as his Father in a way that's not just the Abba language, but makes him on equal footing as God. And he says he can do nothing by himself. So he's saying that there's this authority, and that this authority is the covenantal relationship of this eternal source, but is different than the way the authorities are interpreting it. He goes so far to stir these waters. In verse 45, he says that you do not believe Moses, but all your hopes are in Moses, and that the accuser is not him, Jesus, but the accuser is Moses. Why? Because Moses has a word. Moses speaks of Jesus. So here he draws upon the lineage of authority, but says that the very origin with Moses, that Moses himself would disagree with the leadership. Stimulus and space to respond with freedom. That is always taking place in our lives. And my interest here is not to say stand against authority or stand for authority. My interest here is a deeper question: what is freedom? What is freedom? Because I think that's what Jesus was standing for, was simply freedom. He was able to penetrate the nuances of the law, the text, the leadership, and the covenantal relationship. And then in chapter 6, he moves through the land, and he crosses to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and he's teaching a great crowd of people, and it's considered 5,000 people, which would be in that time and day a great amount of people. And he's feeding them, and then it concludes and he moves away. And I'm going to bypass him walking on the water, but he ends up being in a new place in Capernaum, and people are looking for him because it's such a miracle what he did. And once again, he gives a stimulus. You're not looking for me because of what I said. You're looking at me because you have been fed regular food. And he goes forward and he takes it further. I am the bread of life. My words are spirit and life. And what's testimony that he's right is that his teaching then becomes too hard. So the miracle makes it easy. Wow, I am hungry. Somebody feeds me. That moves me. I want more of that. But what Jesus is interested in is that there's a going further. There's a going further to penetrate. What does it mean? If my stomach's been filled because I'm listening to a teacher speak, shouldn't I then pay attention to the words themselves as they give spirit and life? So we've got authority, we've got interpretation of prophecies, and we've got survival versus enlightenment. Where do we get real nourishment? And in each of these, this person of Jesus is recorded to be offering something that is a fresh relationship with themselves and with their world. And the ability to be free in that moment, to have true growth, would be to draw close to the inspiration, which meant a moving away from authority as it was being presented, the interpretation of a prophecy, which actually means something different, and the attachment, the grasping for survival needs. Then he goes further, and with claiming to be the bread of life, he points to an eternal heritage, because he says that he is of God, that is a father. And the people, as they see all this happening, they're like, but don't we know where he's from? Because the texts say that you will not know who the Messiah is from. You will not know the origins of the Messiah. But the sophistication is that it's not a heritage that's of blood lineage. It's an eternal heritage. Again, new stimulus in the present moment, providing some space for a different response. And of course, then we've got that beautiful record of Peter saying, when Jesus says, will you leave me as well? And Peter says, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. So Peter had a glimpse of what might be called enlightenment. And then you move on to John chapter 7, where it's the Feast of Tabernacles. And Jesus avoids going because the authorities are after him, but he ends up going in secret. And he speaks about his teaching not being his own. And he says something that's really dramatic. He says this. Let me see if I can. Okay, he says this. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or I speak on my own. He supports personal autonomy. He doesn't say, do what I say, then you'll be doing the will of God. He says, choose the will of God. Center in. Think freely for yourself. Then you'll have the gauge to know whether what I do is of the divine or not. Personal will as the path. New stimulus, space, response. Then Nicodemus, who has already had a dramatic encounter with Jesus, he's the only one in a leadership council that says, should we condemn a man before even hearing him? And what is the response to him? If you look at the text, this is a leader saying it, you'll see that no prophet comes from Galilee and Jesus is from Galilee. So Jesus is condemned not for his words, but from an interpretation that might be wrong. That might be wrong. So we get here this really sophisticated relationship that is the record of Jesus with those around him. But what I was struck by as I was rereading these gospel passages was how free Jesus was and how countercultural this person was. I mean, when you look at, I didn't read, of course, the entire passages to you. Very often people are being questioned, and almost always they're hiding what they believe or what they know, because why? They are afraid. The parents of the paralytic man were approached and they deferred. They said to the authorities, they said, don't ask us, our son is of age, ask him. Why did they say this? Because they knew if they answered what they knew to be true, they would be cast out from the synagogue. They didn't lie, but they avoided their own truth. We are plunged into these opportunities every single day. And again, I want to invite you to do what Jesus was doing, to step away being for or against anybody or any system, and get close to the movement of the divine within you, to let it allow you to penetrate what's true for you, and then stand for it. Stand up for it. Not by standing for or against. You can see in like each of these passages that I paraphrased, Jesus makes stands that are by nature of the stand for or against something. But do you see the difference between that and being caught in dualism that stands for or against something itself? Over and again, he says, you do not hear what's really being said. Listen and you will hear what's being said. He says that in the passage that has to do with Moses. He says it again in John chapter 8, when he says that Abraham didn't mean what they're thinking, and that they're not really sons of Abraham. And they're not really sons of God. Jesus makes some wide claims there, not because he's condemning, but because he's deciphering where there's error in understanding and thought and freedom. In chapter 8, he's talking with authorities, and these authorities say Abraham's our father. And Jesus says, if you were Abraham's children, you would do what Abraham did. You wouldn't be looking to kill me. And then they retort with, we're not illegitimate children. The only father we have is God himself. See, they're kind of avoiding the real point. And Jesus said, if God were your father, you actually would love me. Because you would hear what's being said. We are given opportunities like this at every moment in our lives to go deeper, to take the stimulus that's before us, to open up to the space so that the truth can set us free. So that the truth can set us free. This is no easy path, my friend. It's simple. I talk about it very often from this banquet spirituality. So in a way, when I'm offering my various teachings, I'm doing so from an entry point of the connection to the divine in such a way that it's soft. And it is soft. Because every time we open up to this true healing, we are consoled by the light that comes to us. We are consoled. It is soft. We are seen, we are heard. We are known in all our struggles and conundrums. But what I'm speaking here is also hard because it settles for nothing less. It demands everything of us. And wherever you're still holding on through a codependent attitude, through some kind of unwillingness for all the right reasons, you are simply delaying your own process. But in that delay, there is still beauty. I want to offer softness here because sometimes we delay the process because we have other healing to do until we have the freedom to say yes to the truth that will set us free. Because this is not a mental game. You can't just flip a switch and say, I'm for it or against it. It is a true awakening process. So this is not me condemning you if you're taking 50 years to come to one insight that sets you free in an area. It is simply pointing to the reality that this truth settles for nothing less. And the process will take as long or as short as your process takes. If you could hear, that's what Jesus is saying. It's like if you heard what Moses was actually saying, you wouldn't be persecuting me. If you were really sons and daughters of Abraham, you would have known that Abraham wasn't creating a static, separated religious structure around these things. He was giving his vulnerable assent to the truth that he experienced. And you would say yes to your own way as he did, and as the many women who do that aren't recorded in these texts. So this is coming to the end of Jesus's life. I thought it was a good setup because if you look at this taking a step back and from the eyes of Jesus, as things are getting closer to his own death, what's happening? He is running into challenge after challenge after challenge. And he is doing well. He's not betraying his truth. He's like a warrior whose sword is sharpened, who is able on the spot to have the stimulus happen and be able to offer a response in a timely way because of his self-possession. He's a witness to us of where we are moving to. That's a lot, right, to digest. So part of what is implicit in this is entering into a new mind, right? Because at each of these junctures, when he's talking to authorities, hordes of people, his own close friends, anybody that he's healing, he is always taking it deeper. It's not about the fact that you're healed. It's about the fact that you open up to the truth. It's not about this rule. It's whether you open it up that your interpretation might be really aligned with spirit. So it's about our mind being recreated and never settling for a pattern. And I'm going to drop, I know this is a very long reflection, I'm going to drop a balm in here that I've quoted because I just heard it recently through Joe Dispenza. He says, I believe that we are now in an era where we are no longer required to die for the truth. Jesus died for the truth. But rather, we are the iteration of humanity that is here to live for the truth. Not live for it and be a martyr, but actually live for it here and now. Do you want to live for the truth here and now? Is there any part of you that has a little bit of a martyr relationship with your own truth? So for this meditation, which is going to be a little shorter today because of the long reflection, I want you first to start by pausing the recording and identifying for yourself some response that is happening within you to stimulus that you know is coming from a reactive place, that's not coming from a place of neutrality and growth and freedom. For instance, maybe in your standing for your truth, you are having a battle with some authority, person, or structure. That battle response itself is a reactive response. So it could be anything. And again, I named a number of themes with these encounters with Jesus. And then as you identify it, I'd like you to take a moment and look towards yourself as being Jesus. Because Jesus is responding to his environment. So don't look to Jesus as something outside of you. Take a moment to reflect and identify with Jesus as a part of who and what you are. And then we're going to create some space around this so that you can have a new mind and step into the energy of your Christ nature. All right, so I'm going to pause for a minute. You can stop the recording, and then when you're ready, you can start it back up again. Okay, great. So you should have those 2 steps before you, and I invite you to close your eyes. And if you've not already done so, bring these 2 action steps that I gave you. Identifying a response that's not aligned with the truth, that is free, and make a commitment that you're going to open up to your Christ nature, that Jesus witnesses to you a way that you are Jesus. Bring your focus to your breath. And breathe in and out audibly. It can be nose, 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 mouth, mouth, mouth. Pay attention to the sound. We're going to begin by using a guided breath practice. So after your next exhale, exhale as fully as you can and follow my guidance. Hold the exhale out. Exhale is finished. 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale as fully as you can, holding it as fully as you can, and then hold it for as long as you possibly can. And when you feel like you can't hold any longer, take a sip and keep holding. And keep holding, 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 keep holding. And only when you can hold no longer, exhale very, 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 very slowly. And when you reach the end of the exhale, do the same. Exhale completely and hold for as long as you possibly can. And then when you can hold it no longer, if you've not already done so, inhale very slowly. Inhale like all the air around you is filling your lungs and your entire body. And then begin to hold. And hold for as long as you can. Hold, 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 hold. And when you reach a point where you feel like you can't hold any longer, take a sip in. And keep holding. And begin to exhale very slowly. Exhaling until you are fully exhaled. And then hold at the bottom of the breath, we'll call it. Hold for as long as you can. And only when you can hold no longer, slowly inhale, letting the entire body just inflate with air. Holding, 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 pulling in, pulling in, pulling in. And then when you're at the top of the breath, when your body can expand no further with air, hold. We call this the top of the breath. Hold, 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 hold. you can, keep holding. And if not, very slowly exhale. And after this exhale, let your breathing go back to its normal pattern and notice how you feel. And then bring your focus to the head, the skull and the brain and all the facial features. Bring your focus to your 2 ears. Become aware that your 2 ears exist in space. And that space is an infinite amount of possibilities. Bring the focus to the nose and notice that your nose as well exists in space. It is part of a field of potentiality. Bring your focus to your eyes and eyeballs and eye sockets. Notice that this organ exists in space, surrounded by space. Notice that the mouth exists in space, the tongue, the teeth, the nasal cavities, all existing in space. The jaw, the face, back of the neck. Back of the skull, forehead, all existing in space. The focus to the brain and see it existing in space, this brain you call yours. And here we're going to open up to just a little bit longer silence. Feel and see. Sense this brain exists in the vastness of space. That all the elements that make up the brain are more empty matter than not. And therefore can have new life even instantaneously. Open up to this taking place for yourself in relation to what you've brought into this meditation. know that this spaciousness is benevolent. It wills your good. It is a divine design at the service of your freedom. And it's time to bring this meditation to a close. But if you have time, let yourself linger. When you're ready, bring the palms together in front of the heart to open the eyes with Namaste. Namaste.